Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick. Our tutorial for today is on MTHFR. MTHFR is essentially a gene problem. So all of us have genes. The genes are the messages that we pass on through our DNA to newer cells or to our offspring. And the messages hopefully will create a good human being that won't have disease like cancer, heart attack, neurodegenerative disorder. And it'll hopefully keep disease to a minimum if it does show up. Now, one of the problems is if you have a problem with making this little thing. This is a methyl group, and that's a carbon. I'm going to go a little biochemistry here. That's why I put that. I didn't do all the details, but this is a carbon. If you follow me, you might be able to understand. Carbon, hydrogen, hydrogen, hydrogen. This is a pretty stable structure in biochemistry. And just remember that, because this is a methyl group. And this methyl group gets transferred everywhere. And that's the importance, specifically when you have bad buildup of, say, homocysteine. Homocysteine is a blood test that you should be getting on you if you have a cholesterol problem. Or I get it on everybody, really. It just depends on the insurance. So when your homocysteine levels are high, that usually correlates well with increased chances for cardiovascular disease or neurodegenerative diseases. I think it can weakly be related to cancer increase, but homocysteine is usually a byproduct of methionine. Methionine it really comes from meat. You can have a little bit of it if you're a vegetarian or vegan, but when methionine, which is essentially, well, this is homocysteine. In fact, this is homocysteine. So that's how the molecular structure looks. When the homocysteine is found to be building up in the cell, we have an automatic check valve that takes care of it and stabilizes it. So this, I believe it's the sulfur group here. This is the yellow part, the sulfur group that makes it irritating and dangerous to linings of blood vessels and neural tissue. But when you get to methylate it using B12 and the byproducts of this folate cycle, you turn it into methionine, which is essentially inert. Not inert, but it's useful, it doesn't destroy. And how do you do that? Well, this is homocysteine, goes through here, and you essentially put this around the sulfur group, and you have methionine. And bingo, that now is a non-dangerous molecule. So that's why it goes up here. But again, you have to have cofactors, like B12, and the byproducts of the folate cycle to be able to do that. Otherwise, if you have a screwed up problem here, or you can't get any folate in, don't take enough green leafy vegetables, liver, legumes, or your MTHFR gene is screwed up, your enzyme's screwed up, this shuts down. If it shuts down, no methyls, and this part does not donate, and you are stuck with a whole bunch of homocysteine. And I mentioned before that you have a backup system in the body, just in case one pathway is screwed up. Well, you can go this route to cystathione and cysteine to take care of the homocysteine, but this is not as robust of a pathway to get rid of all this stuff. The best way is to get a methyl group. And obviously, if there's something wrong, or if you have the gene that determines that you're not going to be able to make this cycle occur, sometimes there's a couple other things that you might be able to do. One is try to get methylated B12. If you take regular B12, B12 capsules or B12 tablets or B12 powder, I usually suggest 1,000 micrograms a day should be fine. You can also get that in your food sources, but unfortunately, if it's not methylated, it's not going to have this little guy. So this has methylated, I'll bring it closer. This is methylated cyanocobalamin. So the shots that I give in the office are cyanocobalamin. This is, this is methylcobalamin. The shots I give in the office are cyanocobalamin, so that's usually going to work for people without MTHFR issues. Now, if you have an MTHFR issue that's been found or suspicious for, then I would suggest getting the shot with methylcobalamin. Or instead of taking regular B12, you take methylcobalamin in oral form too. So that we usually get to bypass a little bit. You might be able to donate a methyl group to homocysteine so you can neutralize it. So at least if you have it in you, in methyl form, you have more methyl precursors, so you will not have this system bogged down. Because again, there's other options. And so if you do have issues with homocysteine being elevated, usually what I would do is give methylfolate, methyl B12, B2, I put them all down here. Methylfolate, methyl B12, B2, B6, and then I'm going to talk about this in a second. So those are all the Bs. All those Bs are important as cofactors for this cycle to occur, unless you want to have a whole bunch of homocysteine, and we don't want that. Now there's more details as far as which way this cycle goes in a fed or a fasting state, but that's too confusing. I just wanted to talk about how this little guy is beneficial for people with MTHFR. And while we're talking about that special test, I can get it via ACL. I don't know if it's always covered by insurance. And if you can't get it covered by insurance, there's other ways to kind of figure out. It's kind of old school. Just go ahead and try methylcobalamin. I mean, you just try the methyl B12 and the methylfolate and see what happens, in addition to vitamin B2 and vitamin B6. Now, the B6 is a little bit iffy because if you go too low on your B6 or go too high on your B6, it might cause a neuropathy type symptom, numbness and tingling, shooting pains, so you have to be careful with that one. But the rest of them, pretty much, there is no top out for those. B vitamins typically are lost in the urine. So, but what I wanted to mention is that I don't hear everybody talking about choline. Choline, this is the model of choline. That's over here. Choline or betaine is a great methyl donator. So look at this. This is the methyl group. Look at all these methyl groups on choline. Now you can take choline and you get 1, 2, 3. You got 3 groups that can be cleaved off. Now I don't know which of the groups usually gets cleaved off, but choline is a methyl donator, and you can see why. It's full of methyls. So this structure, if it's cleaved off here, it can also help neutralize homocysteine. So you take, let's just for an example, take this guy off, and then as it uses the enzymes in this process, it just attaches to the sulfur agent, or the sulfur molecule that's on the homocysteine structure. So if you can imagine this being a great donor, then you would ask, well, if that's not working, why not just do this? And that would be wise. I usually suggest that. The problem is finding choline. So if you haven't figured it out so far, if I'm suspicious for you to be MTHFR, I would check. If your insurance doesn't cover it, I would just go ahead and do this anyway for about 2 months and see. Now, what I'm going to do is give you methylfolate at about 500 micrograms a day, methyl B12 at about 1,000. This is 5,000. This is huge, but about 1,000 micrograms a day, and then B2 and B6. Typically, when I have headache patients, I give them B2 at 400 milligrams twice a day, but the studies have been shown using, I think, 10 to 20 only. I'm not sure if going over that would hurt, but so that's, and then the B6. So that would be a trial I would do for about 1 to 2 months without any other changes, without any other variables, so we can see, did life get better? But I also suggest choline. So just to make it real easy, if something is not working over there and you have a lot of this and you want to turn it to this, you can do it this way. And if that's not working, do it this way, but you have to have a lot of this. So this is choline. If you have enough cholines, you'll be able to probably take over a lot of the conversion of homocysteine to methionine. And a choline, it can come in several different forms. Phosphatidylcholine is usually what I want, but it's hard to find that one. And Consumer Labs did a pretty good workup of cholines that are out there, and there's one by Yarrow brand, but I haven't tried it myself. I'll try to put a link down below or do more details in a follow-up video on finding Yarrow brand, but there is one that's really high, because most of the studied choline molecules or products only had about 30 to maybe 40 to 50% choline as far as the capsule or the dose, the serving size. There was one that was not available in the United States that went up to about 71%. But so you're at a disadvantage. I do not know that there can be an overdose in choline. I don't know of any side effects, but if you again are suspicious for that and you want to try supplanting your system with a lot of methyl groups, this will be the way to do it. So if there's no side effects of taking extra choline every day, and choline can be found in usually meats, liver, eggs especially, but I think it came out to equal 900 to 1200 milligrams of choline, you'd have to take about 5 eggs, I believe, and they should be free-ranged, really yellowish. So there's, I guess, a cholesterol issue you have to worry about, a lutein positive effect, but that's one way to get the choline in. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian like I am, then you might have to just take choline. But again, that would be my measure for anybody that we're suspicious for. And remember, even if you do turn out to have one of those 2 alleles that I mentioned as far as the MTHFR, if you do have that, it doesn't mean you have to express it. You might be going through a lot of symptoms. If you're having fibromyalgia, chronic pain, moodiness, rumination, maybe even schizophrenia or schizoaffective type disorders, neural tube defects, miscarriages. If you have a couple of those things going on and your doctor is hitting the wall, we've done everything and just not getting any better, it might be worth doing this a little bit for 2 months of a trial and seeing. And remember, if you do it for a 2-month trial without any variables, season is a variable. So you can't do it now because the season here in Chicago is changing. In the month of April, we're going to be having a plethora of different fruits and veggies coming out on the market. So that technically is a variable. Try to keep it stable. That way you know after 2 months, if you feel great, whether it's placebo or not, you should continue with this stuff. Oh, one more thing to mention, I put it down here, creatine. Sometimes it's not involved in this, but creatine, when you formulate creatine, when you make creatine, you have to donate a methyl group in the formation of the creatine. So if you actually take creatine, and most of the bodybuilders take creatine, then you at least take a little bit of burden off of this system. So let me speak one more time. So this is an important cycle, but sometimes what draws methyl groups away from this is in the creation of creatine. Now you can take creatine and get the system to not have to worry about this donation, and it might be helpful. So creatine by itself, it causes a little bit of water weight. If you ask any bodybuilder, we use it in bodybuilding and exercise to increase fluid in the muscle and increase the power range of that muscle during the movement or the exercise. You essentially, when I've taken it, I essentially pee it off within 2 or 3 hours, but it does give you a bit of, creatine phosphate, it's supposed to donate a phosphate group, and it's supposed to give you the phosphate group to the ADP to turn into ATP, which is energy. And I have noticed that it gave me more power under the curve when I wanted to hit with 1 rep maxes, but that could be placebo. However, it still, in theory, would de-stress the system that might be suffering from MTHFR with not requiring to methylate that the creatine. So if you take the stress off the system with just taking some creatine, 5 grams a day, and maybe also taking choline, 900 to 1200 a day, then at least if there's a strain, you decrease the strain. Now one more time. Even if you have a positive gene test with MTHFR, it's still, there's a lot of epigenetics that plays into this. So just because you have that SNP, that single nucleotide polymorphism, you don't necessarily have to have the disease process express itself. But I'm assuming if you got it or you asking me to do it, you're probably suffering from something. So sometimes, many times, even if that you have the MTHFR variable, I would always say work on environment, work on stress, because those things, work on nutrition, because those things always will work on top of the gene to either express it or repress it. So that should hopefully give you an idea about why it's so important to have this little guy, and maybe try the methylated B12, methylated folate, B2, B6, choline, and creatine. So the creatine is an extra one, but the one caveat with creatine, I remember before, when we were bodybuilding, we used to load up with, I forgot, I think it's like 20,000 milligrams. No, I forgot what it was, but you maintained with 5 grams a day, and you loaded with, I think, 10 to 20 grams for 3 days. But it would, because it causes such a massive efflux and influx of fluid, I would have the terrible cramps. So that's just me, but just be careful because it does do that. I don't think you have to worry about kidney function. But if you're an athlete already, well, you might be getting around it. But I'm assuming if you're an athlete already, you're not suffering from those symptoms of the supposed MTHFR. So I'm drawing this out. However, I'm done at this point. So hopefully this wasn't too biochemistry confusing. But if you have any comments on what you have done and where you bought your Bs, your cofactors, which one worked for you, please put it down below. I'm trying to take a survey on who gets the choline and where you get it. I haven't been able to find any great companies yet, except for Yarrow brand, and I'll put it down below. But I don't have that gene, so I can't tell you that it's really helping. I have a few patients I'm working on, but we just started to test since the insurance is becoming a little more lenient. So otherwise, hit the subscribe button and the alert button to find out when I do new videos. Thanks for watching.